Okay, on with the first part of the example. So you will open up brackets, and if you haven't already, the first thing you will do is open up the extension manager. Takes a few minutes. Look for Emmet, install Emmet, then restart brackets, not the computer. So close it down, open it up again, and that will be all good. We will use Emmet a little bit, increasingly as we go on. I also want you to then open folder, and if you haven't already, create a folder for this work. I've created a folder called BBC KillingEve example. I'll select that folder. It then opens it up for me. I've been saving the images, as we saw in the last example video. So these images and the PDF file are all in this folder. Some of them will show up in XML, so that's what SVG is, code. Some of them will show up as JPEGs. I think we've got PNG there as well, yeah. So we've got everything we need in terms of images. The first thing you're going to do is create a new file and then save it. Always save it. Always remember that it needs a file extension name of HTML if we are to get the code in that we require and for it to work properly anyway. So I'll just call this blank. Save that in your root folder. What's the root folder? The root folder is the main folder. So my BBC KillingEve example, that is my root. Everything else is essentially a child of that. It's a branch from that, as you will. So images is inside of the root, but is not. There we go. So save it there. And what I want to do is just to create a basic HTML file that we can open up and save as every time we create a new file. So the first thing we do is we tell it the doc type, which is going to be HTML in this case, and then we give it the bracket of HTML. Notice the code hinting coming up. I press enter at this point. I'll close the bracket, and there we go. I'm going to have a head, and it's the end of that line, enter, and I'm going to have a body, the visible area of the web page. Inside the head, we will likely have a title. So in this case, the title will be KillingEve Microsite example. We will put our style sheet in there eventually. Actually, it's supposed to be blank. I will put that in later on then. And the title can just be a default of new document. Okay, so that's a very basic HTML page. The next thing I want to do is click on that button there to get a live preview. If the live preview doesn't work, then you will need to close brackets down and start it again. Chances are that if you install Emmet and don't close brackets down and reopen it, the live preview will stop working. There are some instances when it just seems to do it randomly, but live, so you just close it, reopen it, works fine. So we can see a blank document, not that exciting. We file and save it, so Control S or file save. Now I'm going to save as, and this time it will be KillingEve example 1. Although strictly speaking, shouldn't have any spaces, so using underscores instead. Now I can put my title in. KillingEve example, and then after the title, I'm going to start my style sheet off. So style, and in the body, we'll start putting some tags in there first, but let's just get something in place first. That's striking background image body. So we refer to the tag, and you might remember that from previous examples. We can refer to a tag, we can refer to a class, we can refer to an ID, we can refer to a compound of any of those things put together. And there are also things called pseudo selectors. We will use at least one pseudo selector, which is hover, where we can refer to something being rolled over, but there are others that you might come across. Some of the most common ones are things like before and after, that insert things before an element or after an element. But for this one, we're going to go background, image, we'll scroll down to URL, press enter, and then it will show me some of the files I've got and the folder. Images is where this file is. Looking for the KillingEve background large JPEG. Strange, got a JPEG extension. It's unusual. Semicolon to finish that line off, and if the live preview is working, which it is, that's what it's going to look like. So what we're going towards is something like the layout for KillingEve Microsite on a PC display. You wouldn't necessarily be expected to do something fully responsive like this that changes with each screen size, but if you did work in that way, you would certainly be ticking some of the boxes of the top end of the grading criteria for the NEA. We're going to be working to a size of about 1,000 pixels, 1,200 actually. So let's see a breakpoint when it changes there. So 1280. 1280 is the width. So it's a 720p screen to kind of work into. That's where the first breakpoint is. That's where the style sheet changes. So a new style sheet basically starts working. And then again, about 1,000 pixels there, starts to scroll in. And then there and there. These are known as breakpoints, just for reference. Okay, up and down. So we've got the background image. That's a start. The next thing we're going to focus on is we'll focus on getting the logo in, this logo in, and this kind of menu first before we move on to the bigger job of doing the grid layout for those different cards that we can see. So we're very much interested in the microsite, less so the header for the BBC main site and the footer for the BBC main site. We're just interested in the central area for now. Okay, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to use what's known as a wrapper, but I'm going to use the main tag, which is quite descriptive. This is the main area. And what I'm going to do inside of the main is I'm going to have a division or divider for the BBC one logo. Oops. Notice that I'm using underscores consistently to avoid using spaces in file names and class names, ID names, etc. This one will be the KillingEve logo. Now, there's two ways we can put the images in. We can either add them as background images, as you've seen us do to the body for these elements, or we can just put an image tag inside of the div. And I'll probably go for the latter this time round. But first off, I would like to do a few things to the main tag. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give it a border so I can see where it is on the page. Border, I'm going to say thin, white. White will stand out against that background image, and solid. Have a quick look at this. To the preview page, you can see the line there. It takes up the full page. There's a bit of margin around the outsides of it. I'm then going to set it to have a width of between 1,000 and 1,200 pixels. You can decide whatever works best for your monitor, really. Preview it again. There we go. It's got smaller. What I want to do then is to set margin of the margin left and right to auto. You can set any value, but by doing this, what it'll do is it will center that main, and anything that goes inside of it will therefore be centered to, or at the very least positioned relative to that. So the main box will get bigger, we'll see where it is, and then I'll get rid of the border eventually because there's no need for it in the final version. Okay, so let's get some logos in there. Version 1. Make sure you've got spaces because the code hinting doesn't work as well without it. So I type in image, press enter, space, and then because I've got some space between that and the next tag, it's giving me some code hints. Source of the image, gives me this. I click on images or press enter, and I'll scroll down. So I'm looking for the BBC One logo. It's right there in front of me, pretty easy to find. And then I close that tag. It's interesting. I wonder why it did that. The other way we can do it is to use Emmet. So I'm just going to put in IMG, press tab, and look what it did. It put all of that in there for me, a source and an alt attribute. So the source, as you are now familiar with, is where the image comes from. So let's find the KillingEve logo. The alt is where you would write some kind of description for screen readers. So KillingEve logo type. Let's have a quick look. There we go. Okay. It's not looking too bad so far. The first thing we'll probably want to do is to move the KillingEve in, and we will probably want to reposition the BBC One. So let's start off with ID BBC logo. Perhaps would have liked to have used shorter. So the div ID for BBC One logo, curly brackets. Notice how it gives me the second one again. Press enter. All of this comes inside of the style tags. So you'll notice there if I click on style, there's the start, there's in the style. I'm going to make sure it's in there. And okay, I'm going to give this a position of absolute, but I'm not going to do the same thing for the KillingEve logo. Let's have a look at the example. There we go. It's dropped down already, which is great, because then if I tell the KillingEve logo small keyboard, small keyboard, there we go. So what I'm going to do with KillingEve logo is I'm going to put a margin on the left hand side. Let's just try like 100 pixels. See how far that pops it across. Let's get in there. Yeah. Let's try more like 200 pixels, might be a little bit far. Too far. Let's go with 160. And then what I'm going to do with the BBC One logo is I'm going to put its box to have a background color. Now this is going to be interesting because I'm going to want the background color. We'll start off with red, but it won't be the right red. You can just see there, it stands out a little bit. I'll do for now. And then I'm going to give it a width. Remember, we're talking to the box that contains the image. And just give it a width of about 160 pixels actually. There we go. We're going to try and cheat this by saying text align right and see if that'll just shove the image across for us, which it does. And then we can offset that to the left a little bit, like they've done. They've basically got it going back by half. It's actually a bit bigger, isn't it? Let's try 180 pixels instead. Looks about right. So I'm going to have to handle the colour a little bit later on to figure out what that colour is going to be. I mean, there might be some different types of reds that we could consider. Dark red's going to be too dark. So we will probably be using an RGB colour. Like I say, we'll leave it for now. I'll find out what the colour is later on. And then I'm going to just move that, because it's got an absolute position, we can put it anywhere on the screen that we want. It could be relative as well, but I'm going to go left minus 100 pixels. Might actually need to be 80 pixels. Let's have a look. Ooh, that's not where we want, unless it's relative. Let's have a look and see what relative does. If we change the way that this is calculated relative to its original position, all of a sudden that works perfectly. I think 80 pixels is probably the right amount. Might even be a touch less. Yeah, that's better. But you notice that it's nudged the KillingEve down. So the question then is, the choice between the absolute positioning and how we get it to where we want it to be, or the relative positioning, and in which case we would move the KillingEve up a touch. There you go, absolute. And try margin left, which is a bit of a hack to knock it back like that. Okay, so the next thing seems to have worked. KillingEve has gone back up, close enough to the original, and what we will do then is put in this navigation, which is going to have a bit of a background colour. I wonder if we can find out from inspecting the element what that colour is. So we're looking for div class. That could be it. Background colour there. A bit ready. We'll start off with that colour though and see what it looks like on ours. Although you can see through that colour, so it's actually an RGBA colour. That's a bit closer. There we go, there's the RGBA colour. So that's probably going to be our menu colour there. Copy that. Hopefully, if I have an ID of menu, which I'll create shortly, and we'll just say that it's got a background colour. Copy and paste that in. Okay, so it's giving the value. All I need to do is put in before it RGBA brackets and put that colour inside of it. And I'll quickly explain what that colour value is. So we've got the amount of red on a scale of 0 to 255, the amount of green on a scale of 0 to 255, the amount of blue on a scale of 0 to 255, and then this last bit on a scale of 0 to 1 is how opaque that colour block will be, so how transparent it is. Okay, and now what I've got to do is create the menu, so I'll put that underneath this. Sorry, it's going to be a nav. And inside of that nav, I will then have an unordered list Again, a few different ways you could achieve this, but I'm going to stick with using the list item method, and inside of that list item each one would have an A tag. However, this is a good excuse for us to get used to using emmet. So I'm going to delete all of that and show you again, slightly different. So we're going to need a nav, type that in. It will have an ID of menu for now, and inside of it there will be an unordered list, and inside of that some list items. Try and multiply that by, I think it's 4 or 5. Let's have a quick look at the original. Oh, 4. So times 4, and inside the list item there will be a link here, and that's about it, to be honest. So when I press tab, it creates it for me. It puts the nav ID menu in, it creates the unordered list, each of the list items, and the A and the reference there. So in between the start and end of the A tag, we can then put in our little sub-menu items, which are episodes, clips, characters. I think they'll all be capitalized. Actually, I won't use capitals. Just use normal sentence case for now. Home, clips. Is it home, clips, characters? Episodes, clips, characters. Okay. Let's have a quick look at the example. Right, so you can see the colours see through. A few things we're going to want to do to that menu now. We're just going to get rid of the bullet points. So we can use a compound selector, menu, look at the list items, and tell them to have a list style type of none. That gets rid of that. I'm also going to reference menu. Now you can reference menu A directly, or you can reference menu list item A. So I'll be specific in this case, and I will tell that text decoration to be none also, to get rid of the underlining. There we go. I think we're going to want to set the menu unordered list display to inline block. Just double check that. Might actually be the list item itself. There we go, list item. So I don't need that there at all. In which case, we might need a rule for the unordered list parent at some point. I'll leave it in there just in case. So inline block, and then let's start putting some padding around the text of, say, 10 pixels to start off with. Could be a little bit bigger. Maybe go with 15 pixels. I'll also tell the font size for the links to be a bit bigger. Maybe let's try 1.25 again. Slightly bigger. There we go. I think we're probably going to want the text to be a different colour. So the colour in there will become white for now. Let's see. It is black. Oh well, we'll leave it as black for now then. There we go. The next thing we're going to do is just put some hovers in. I wonder what colour they change to. They get a little bit darker, don't they? So we'll have a little play with the RGB values for the background colour of the A on a hover. So this is a pseudo selector. menu. It's also a compound as well. List item A, colon, hover. And so you get a list of some of the pseudo selectors on offer. So scroll through them. Hover is the one we are using. Strange, it deleted my colon then. And what we want to do is to set the background color. And what I'm going to do is RGBA again. This time, I'm going to hopefully have a bit of an effect on the color underneath. So if 0 is black, so 3 zeros is black, and then if we say to have a value of about 0.5, and let's see what it looks like. Ooh, it's not affecting the padding for some reason. We might have to have a look at a different way of doing that shortly. Actually, I'll get rid of the A, just do it on the list item. Let's try that colour a touch lighter. 0.2. Ooh, I'll tell you why it's not working. Needs one of these commas. Almost perfect. Okay, so I'm going to stop at that point for this video, and we'll look at the rest of the layout in a separate one.